going on, everyone? I wanted to talk a little bit about Guardian as it relates to Dragonflight today. I'm going to run through the latest talent tree that we have and just kind of talk about what I think is going to be the best bear spec. I've been looking a lot lately at the tanks, and I have a very strong suspicion that early on you're going to see a return to form for the Guardian Druid to become one of the better tanks in M+. I feel like Warrior is also going to be there, and the more I look at Demon Hunter, I feel like that's also going to be there. That's not to say that Blood suddenly is going to completely disappear, because they've managed to keep a lot of what was given to them in Shadowlands 3 and 4 in their talent trees as well. But when it comes to strength of trees, it's all going to come down to the throughput and the tuning that Blizzard does anyway. So we don't know what's going to be the strongest tank just based on looking at these trees, but we can pretty much do a pretty good job of kind of projecting what it's going to look like should you opt to play one of these classes in Dragonflight, how it's going to play, just based on what's in the tree itself. So without any more procrastination, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of fill out the bear tree in a way that I feel like makes the most sense for Dragonflight. So I'm going to start first on the spec tree itself, and then we'll go through the talent tree. And you've obviously got to go ahead and hit Maul first. It's a mandatory thing to do. You're going to go ahead and immediately go right into Gore, as well as Survival Instincts. Those are both mandatory. You also want the second charge of Survival Instincts no matter what. You're going to want to come down this direction, only to a certain extent. I'll show you why here in a little bit. You can go Bristling Fur or Brambles on this one. For the sake of just kind of based on how everything's playing to get today, Brambles is pretty much the choice up to a certain key level, so I'm just going to pick that for right now, just as a placeholder. I'm also immediately going to go into Ursine Adept. This is your Moonfire Soothe and Remove Corruption in bear form. So you're going to want this if you're going to want to bring the type of utility and just have most of the abilities that you do today in Shadowlands. I'm also going to come over here and I'm going to take Mangle, and then we're going to get into our initial tree. So I'm going to start by going left first. So I've gone ahead, I've spec'd into Innate Resolve. This is your regrowth and frenzied regen healing that's increased by 20% on yourself. It also gives you a second charge of frenzied regen. So again, another thing that's baseline today in Shadowlands, you gotta spec into it to get it back. I'm then going to come down and take Flashing Claws. This is currently a legendary today, where Thrash has a 20% trigger yet another Thrash. So we kind of get this early on in the tree, which is nice. And I'm going to go right down to Earth Warden. This is when you deal direct damage with Thrash, you're going to gain a charge of Earth Warden, which is going to reduce the damage in the next auto attack that you take by 30 seconds. It stacks up to 3 times, which is really nice as well. I'm going to stop, and I'm going to move over to the right-hand side here a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I get my Berserk. I'm going to come down, and I'm going to take my 2 stacks of Layered Mane. And it also will give you a 10% chance, so that Frenzied Regen has a 10% chance to not consume a charge. So that's really nice. I don't like the fact that you have to go through Gory Fur to build out what I'm going to build out, but we do it just because we have to. So Gory Fur is where Mangle has a 15% chance to reduce the rage of your next Iron Fur by 25%. This is really not a big deal, especially within Berserk and Incarn windows, but we take it just because of where we're going with this tree. I'm then going to come down, and this is where we start to build out what is essentially the return of Disco Bear from Legion. We're going to go ahead and hit this Scintillating Moonlight. This is going to increase the damage dealt by your Moonfire by 4%, so you have to take 2. I'm a little bummed that this isn't just a 1-point talent, but this thing is going to get really juiced up here in a second, so it's definitely worth it. I'm then going to come down to Twin Moonfire, where Moonfire is going to deal an additional 20% increased damage, and it will also hit a nearby enemy within 15 yards of the primary target. So every time I'm Moonfiring now, I'm casting 2 Moonfires as long as the target's within 15 yards. The other thing I'm going to do before I go any further in this tree is I'm going to go back to Galactic Guardian. This is a talent today that generally is not taken just because of the way trees work today. But this is going to give your damaging abilities a 5% chance to trigger a free Moonfire on that target. So when this happens, the next Moonfire that you hardcast is going to generate 8 rage, and then it's going to deal an additional 300% increased direct damage. Now keep in mind that you're going to be replicating that on the second target. So when this thing procs, it's going to juice up your Moonfire. So from here, we're going to come over to this side of the tree. I wish these Berserk talents were switched, but for the sake of making the points work, this is the route that we have to take. So we're going to come down here into Unchecked Aggression for Berserk. This is where your haste is going to be increased by 15%, and it's going to reduce the cost of Maul. This is probably the least synergistic way to do this, but to get access to where we want to go here, you have to do it. Reinvigoration is going to reduce Frenzy Regen's cooldown by 15%. You're going to tap that twice, it'll go down to 30%. We're then going to come over to the choice between Ursac's Fury and Dream of Cineris. We're going to go with Ursac's Fury. This is also a legendary today where Thrash and Maul grant you an Absorb Shield for 75% of the damage dealt for 15 seconds. So we're going to take that from an M+ perspective. And then we're going to come down here, and we'll have a choice between Rend and Tear and Untamed Savagery. Rend and Tear is where each stack of Thrash is going to reduce the target's damage done to you by 2% and increases your damage done to them by 2%. Thrash stacks 3 times on a target, so we know that that is effectively a 6% DR, and it's going to increase your damage on them by 6% as well. The alternative, Untamed Savagery, is going to increase the damage in the radius of Thrash by 25%. You could go either way. I'm more of a fan of the Rend and Tear myself, especially in higher keys. So then we're going to circle on back up here, and we're going to, as you can see, a lot of these talents start to push for a Maul Rage Dump. That's not what we're going to do. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to come down through Reinforced Fur. This is going to increase Iron Fur armor by an additional 4%, and Bark Skin reduces damage taken by an additional 5%. So this will help your overall mitigation kit. We're going to come right down here into Fury of Nature. Now remember what we did before. We went ahead and we juiced our Moonfire, went into Galactic Guardian for those reactive procs, and then proactive hard casts. We get 2 Moonfires on cast. So Fury of Nature is where, when you're in bear form, you're going to deal an additional 10% arcane damage. Moonfire is arcane damage. So we're going to go ahead and 2-tap this, and we're going to juice our Moonfire by another 20%. We then have the option of going Circle of Life and Death, which is where your damage over time effects are going to deal their damage in 25% less time, and your healing over time effect in 15% less time. Or you could go the route of Elune's Favor. And this is where, while in bear form, you deal an increased 30% arcane damage, and you're healed for 30% of all arcane damage done. So you can go either route here. It's really going to be dungeon dependent, and it's really going to come down to the damage. For the sake of just kind of showcasing what this can do, I'm going to go with Elune's Favorite on this one, because it's going to be passively healing me for 30% of all of the arcane damage done. So if I have these juiced up Moonfires going off all the time, I get the passive cast through Galactic Guardian, I am consistently going to be healing myself every single time the Moonfire damage is ticking. I'm then going to come down here and I'm going to be forced to pick between Incarnation, Guardian of Ursac, or Convoke the Spirits. For the sake of making this whole build work, while also providing myself with some tankiness, I'm going to be going with Incarnation. This is the improved bear form, and it's going to be the one that you're going to want to freely take in conjunction with Ursac's Fury. So we're going to have that on a 3-minute cooldown, but then we're going to come down here and we're able to take Ursac's Guidance. And so if you take Incarn, every 20 rage that you spend is going to reduce the cooldown of Incarn by 1 second. So currently, if you're speccing into Incarn today in Shadowlands, you probably have a 2-minute 30-second cooldown on Incarn. This potentially is going to get that even lower, depending on how good you are not making sure that you're rage capped. So you absolutely do not want to be rage capped as a bear, but that's going to go ahead and finish off the Guardian tree itself. And this is why I wanted to do this tree first, just so you can kind of see that this whole notion of Disco Bear from Legion is really coming back. So we've got our Moonfire juiced, we've got 2 Moonfires, we've got our passive Moonfire, we're increasing our arcane damage by 20%, we're increasing it again by 30%, we've got an improved bear form in Incarn, and we've got the reduced cooldown on Incarn. So we've got the synergy between Incarn, Ursoc's Fury, and Earth Warden, and then like I said, I wish that these 2 Berserks were flip-flopped. I would rather have the cooldown reduction on Frenzied Regen by 100% and Iron Fur than I would having this one, because I'm not doing any of the Maul talents. That being said, the increased haste is going to be really nice, especially when you go Incarn. So we're just going to be Thrash Monkeys again with Ursoc's Fury so that we get that shield up, and we're going to be passively spamming Moonfires pretty much based on whether or not we're hitting anything. So there's a chance for it to go out then. There's also a chance to get it, you'll also get the second Moonfire every time that procs as well. So Galactic Guardian, in conjunction with everything else that we've picked, it's going to be really cool to see. It's only 5%, but based on how many targets you're hitting at a time, whenever you thrash, whenever you're really hitting anything, I mean, Bear is an AoE tank, so you're going to see a lot of passive Moonfires that'll buff your proactive hard cast Moonfire. So then we'll come over to the Druid tree. We've got a couple of options, but first we'll go ahead and pick the mandatory things. We're given Thrash, which is great. Then we're going to come down into Swipe. We're going to come grab our Iron Fur, and then we need to grab our Killer Instinct. So already we're at 5 points in because this is a 3-point sink here to go ahead and beef up your physical damage as well as your armor increasing by 6%. We're going to come down to improve Bark Skin since we're going into Brambles here. And then we're going to go ahead and grab Verdant Heart. Frenzied Regen and Bark Skin increase all healing received by 20%. So this is everything that is mandatory when doing M+ tanking. This is not Raid. In Raid we might be talking about taking some cat abilities, but that's not where we're at. So now we're going to come back up, and I'm going to pick between the Resto side or the Arcane side. I'm going to go ahead and obviously go Arcane because I went ahead and juiced up my Moonfire on this side. So I'm going to grab Starfire, and I've now freed up these. I'm going to grab my Interrupt. I'm going to grab my Thick Hide to reduce my damage by 6% across the board. I'm going to grab my Bark Skin, which is going to be essentially a multiplier to juice your damage. I'm going to grab Soothe. I'm going to grab Stampeding Roar, but you'll notice I did not grab the improved one. No need in Mythic Plus, and probably only one Druid in Raid is going to need to have that. But now I'm pretty much out of options. I've done everything that I need to grab here as a bear for M+, so I'm going to come back up to my Arcane tree. So I'm just following the path. You're probably not going to need Hibernate, so we're going to sit that one out. You can go one of 2 ways here. You can either spec into Nurturing Instinct, or you can come down immediately to the Astral Influence. Nurturing Instinct is where you're going to increase your magic and healing by 2%. This is a 3-point skill sync versus a 2-point sync. Astral Influence is going to increase the range of all of your abilities by 3 yards. For those of you who are currently going with the Balance Affinity today, you know that the increased range on a lot of the mobs is super helpful because you're able to go ahead and keep spamming Thrash even if you're not directly on top of mobs. And that's what I'm going to opt to do here. So I'm going to sink 2 points into Astral Influence. Then I've got options going forward. I'm going to hold off for now on Typhoon, and I'm going to immediately go into Sunfire. I'm going to opt out of the improved Sunfire for now, but I only need 1 point left. So you as a player have a free point in this area. You can either go with Typhoon, based on what you need to do in a dungeon, or you can go with Improved Sunfire. Improved Sunfire now applies its damage over time to all enemies within 8 yards. So if you're good at gathering enemies, you only need to cast 1 Sunfire to get it up on all enemies. You're going to have to be careful about how you do this and when you pop in and out of bear form, but I think this could be pretty good. For the sake of how M+ works, though, we're certainly going to want some kind of mob control ability, so I'm going to go ahead and spec into Typhoon. So now that I'm towards the bottom of the tree, there's a couple of things that I'm angling for. The first of which is more mob control. You can get that either through Incapacitating Roar or Mighty Bash. I'm just going to go Roar, you can go either way you want. Well-Honed Instincts is when you fall below 40%, you cast a Frenzied Regen. This can happen once every 2 minutes. If you play bear at all, or if you have played bear at all recently, you'll know that we're getting trucked at times, and just going based off of, again, what I know, I'm only going to sink 1 point into that for right now, but I think it's certainly worth it. We're then going to come back up to Lycara's Teachings. This is where you're going to gain 2% of a stat while you're in each form. When you're in bear form, this is going to give you versatility. So this is my stat stick, where I get 6% versatility. I then have the ability to go Improve Stampeding Roar, where you reduce the cooldown by 60 seconds. Probably not a requirement, but you may like it. I'm instead going to go to Renewal so that I have the ability to heal myself. This is, I mean, bears don't get anything like a cheat death or anything like that. So if you're good at keeping an eye on yourself, this is a great, oh crap button to go ahead and hit as you need it. I'm then going to pop back up here, and I've got the choice of Mass Entanglement versus Ursul's Vortex. Both of these can be very strong based on how you're using it, but given the fact that I know that I'm going to be more of a caster bear and doing disco bear things, I'd prefer to have Ursul's Vortex so that I can make sure that I've essentially rooted enemies in a way that they're grouped up together. I then have the ability, if I want to, based on who I'm running with, to go ahead and spec into Innervate, but this is where things get interesting. You can go ahead and take Nature's Vigil, and what this is going to do for you as a bear is all single target damage is also going to heal a nearby friendly target for 20% of the damage. So we start to talk about synergy here, and Moonfire is a single target damaging ability. So when you have all these free casts of Moonfire going off, and they're hitting for 300% increased direct damage, and you're replicating that on multiple targets, again all single target damage, Nature's Vigil can then become especially strong. And as you can see, I'm still only at 29 out of 31 points. You can go ahead and leverage the capstone here and go with Heart of the Wild. You can remove a point from Well-Honed Instincts if you feel comfortable, grab Heart of the Wild, and then come down here and get Improved Sunfire. The reason you'd want to do this is if you're really good at playing around your Ursul's Vortex. I mentioned before you have to be really careful about popping in and out of bear form to do the Sunfire. This gives you the option to do that, and it's on a 1 minute cooldown. So essentially every other pack, depending on how quickly your group is going. So this is just something cool that I was experimenting, and I felt like there's been talks of resurgence of the Disco Bear from the Legion era, but I think this is going to be even better. And again, you've got freedom here, and depending on how tuning works, it may make sense to go more with Circle of Life and Death over Lune's Favored. But either way, these look like they could be incredibly powerful based on what the tuning is. But you can see once we've kind of set up our Disco Bear spec, we're able to then come over and take the class tree talents that are going to complement it. So I'm super excited. If this ends up being a build that is run not just in 15 and lower keys, but something that can kind of go up into the 20 to 25 range, this is a spec that I think I can see myself having a whole lot of fun with. I'd love to know your thoughts, your comments on this. There's obviously a couple different ways to do this. If you haven't played with the tree yourself, I encourage you to do it. This is really exciting stuff.